Well, welcome back to Rough Restos for the latest episode on the Capri M113 5-litre V8 conversion. So I'm hoping you guys watched the previous videos on this. If you haven't, I advise you go back and watch them so this will make more sense. What we had in the last episode was I dropped in the second M113 out of the S500 for the different sump configuration and realised that it might not actually be any better. So because of this, I've now just measured up roughly where that engine's sitting in the bay, and I'm actually going to swap the CLK 500 engine back into here so I can then measure up again and see how it sits and work out what the best engine is to use. So in about a few seconds, that engine will be in there and that engine will be back over there. Like now. Ta-da! Only if it went that quick in real life. So swap the engines over, got this one mocked up in a rough position, and I've slightly tilted it further, brought the back end up a bit because that's how it needs to sit in the car. Now, there's one big thing with mounting this engine that we must follow, and that is drivetrain angle. So the engine must be parallel to the diff pinion. Now they also must sit at around sort of 3 to 5 degrees as a rule of thumb. So you don't have the diff pinion and your crankshaft sitting at the same angle. They don't sit parallel like that. Well, they don't sit in line with each other. They sit slightly off. So typically, the engine will point down a bit at the back and the diff pinion points up. But it means that both their like centre lines are parallel. And then what you need is a sort of 3 to 5 degree angle from the engine to the prop essentially, so or from the ground. So my engine needs to tilt back somewhere between 3 to 5 degrees, and then my diff pinion needs to tilt up somewhere between 3 to 5 degrees, but it must be within about half a degree of each other. Else you'll get drivetrain vibrations and whatnot, and we don't want to have that. So this angle must be taken with the car sitting at the height it's meant to be sat at. Problem is, I now don't have enough weight on the front end for the car to sit how it should sit. So I do need to change the springs, but I do actually want to change the whole front suspension full stop. So this could get expensive, this engine change, because now I'm just doing more and more and more. But I need the car to be sitting level to be gauging this, or at least getting within the ballpark area and allowing myself a bit of flexibility. Obviously this final angle, as long as I've got clearance on the engine, will be judged by where the actual transmission sits. So I better adjust that by bringing the transmission up or down. But I do need to allow some kind of clearance and play for that. But I need to get it in the ballpark area first so that I can put the transmission up and know how far I need to modify the tunnel. So I put brainwave. Either I try and anchor the car down to the floor and strap it down, which won't really work. I can try and pile some weight on the front, but again that's pretty difficult. Or I might just use the lift to raise the rear of the vehicle up to a height that appears to be, it won't be how it sits, but it'll be fairly accurate, it'll be sitting high on the rear and high on the front, so they're parallel. So I might just raise the rear a second. And there we have it. It's sort of sitting high, but it's sitting high front and rear. And the S-stripe is pretty level to the ground. I'm sure that's how I first sort of designed it, was the S-stripe was meant to sit sort of parallel to the ground. So that's now parallel. We could measure off the plenum, but I don't know that it's definitely straight. So our next best thing is we can measure off the crank, because obviously the crank pulley is going to be parallel to the crank. The crank is what we want the drivetrain to be parallel to, this line. So if that's not level, then it doesn't matter what else on the engine, that is the part it has to be. The crank is our centre line along with our diff pinion. So I've got a little square here I can put up against the crank, and I've got my inclinometer. I got this thing. It's my laser measurer, but it's also an angle thingy-majiggy. Really handy for this kind of stuff. So let's see where it takes us a moment. So I don't think you guys can see much of this, but let's put this down the crank a minute. Try and see what angle we get in there. So it's telling me 87. So from 90 degrees So that was 90. So that's telling me now it's leaning back about 2.7 degrees. Well, that's the case. We can drop the back a smidge more. I know this is not an accurate way of doing it yet, but we can drop the back or raise the front. If anything, we want to drop the back because we've got the gearbox tunnel issues. Where's that brought us to? Again, this is only a rough guesstimate for mocking up here. I will have to do this all properly. Nope. Right, so apparently now we are leaning back by 3.1 degrees. Okay, well, we've got a little bit of clearance here between the steering rack and the engine. If anything, could do it going up a smidge, but not by much, because, yeah. If the steering rack wasn't so much in the way here, we've actually got 1.5 inches we could drop the whole engine by. It's literally just the steering rack that causes these issues. I could also actually gain a bit of clearance by shaving down them fins a bit, because they are only support on the sump, they aren't vital. So they could get shaved down a smidge for a few more mil of clearance, but that's not the end of the world. I'm happy with that. The front end here all seems to fit really well, like I couldn't ask much better than that. The engine mount situation, this mount is hitting on a starter unless it goes up high, but that's, I can get smaller mount, that's the least worries. That's still a simple issue. Obviously the engine's mounted at the correct angle. I've jacked the gearbox up to it now, and what we've got is we've got a evenish gap around the bell housing here to the engine. We are sitting at probably about 20 mil too low on the gearbox, and the gearbox is currently making contact with the tunnel back here on the shifter setup and a little bit where the pipes are. But overall, there's actually quite a bit of space there. Obviously, I can see probably about 20 mil worth of space most of the way around the gearbox to the tunnel. The only part that seems to be and obviously we're going to we'll gain a few more mil when this touches the engine. So I am thinking that the tunnel mods might only have to be, it might actually have to be back here. Looking into this, because obviously the shifter bracket's going to go up, which means the whole shifter setup is going to be in the way there. So we might end up having to cut the tunnel back this far anyway for a shifter. But I might not have to cut it out. So massaging with a hammer might actually be enough. In which case this gearbox seems to be fitting better on this engine. So I think this engine is going to be one to use, because we haven't got the issue of it, the sump coming down the front here, hitting here. We haven't got the issue of it hitting on the steering rack. We've got all this space at the front here, so that means the ARB will be able to fit, unlike the last sump setup. The back here all fits perfect. It kind of just makes more sense. It's a shame because that engine's on half the mileage, but whatever fits easiest. Yeah, and if something goes wrong with this engine, I can literally just unbolt the sumps and swap the engines over. The only difference is the starter's in a different place, but that again is not an issue. Yeah, we can swap that, no problem at all. It's only a bit of wiring. Whew. So that would then need a custom mount made up from here to the body, which again I could actually I could use the standard setup there, or I could fab something that comes off here to a mount which sits on the factory positions. Or previously, but I've had a mount back here for the RX-8 gearbox. That can all go then. Well, I think my next port of call is going to be do some massaging. I might, looking at this, have to strip some of the interior up first, put the gearbox out, and do a few alterations to the gearbox, a few alterations to the tunnel here, and we'll see if we can get it close to fitting. I think we might be able to. Anyway, let's go for it. We're going to make it work. Let's do it. As you can see, that's the centre console bit there removed from here. The main frame is still in place, and as you can see, where those two screws were, the lower two, that's what we saw underneath in the body here. So we've obviously got space behind the clock there for alterations on the trans tunnel, and we've got space here as well. The only thing we might have to do is end up cutting out that bracket that bolts this frame in and re-welding tabs on to move that frame. So overall, if it goes to plan, no interior bits will need to be modified other than the possibility of a couple fixings or something getting moved here which screw it down. I think we best put it back up in the air and start whacking with a hammer and cutting with a grinder until we get to where we want to get to. Try and move some of this wiring so it's not going to get caught. Yeah, it'd be right. And then we need to look at getting a hydraulic clutch fitted as well, because we're going to need one of them with a new box. And it would be nice because cable ones are they're old. So you can also see I've moved the cable that goes across the top with a line, because we don't really need the hard line going across the top, especially not at the moment anyway. Blanked off the quick disconnect, and then there's this little stub here. We also don't need that, so I guess we might as well cut that off as well, because that's just in our way, isn't it? Free up a bit of space here, make things simple. Progress has been made. So what I've done is, we might be able to tell a bit, we cut out a section of a tunnel back here a minute, because I can't see now because the prop's in the way, because of the top of a shifter which was hitting before. So again, I'm probably going to have to cut more of a tunnel up there when I get a shifter, but I've got to try to find one, and they seem really difficult to find. I've massaged the rest of the tunnel with a bit of a hammer, and that's created a nice bit of clearance. So that's now the engine sitting in at the right angle. It looks even more wrong in a minute, but if you look at the chassis rail there, this car needs a lot of work. Oh dear. Look at the chassis rail, it's going downhill as well, so the engine actually is not too off. We've still got our little gap between the steering rack, which I'm going to have to raise it up a smidge. Just got to do it. Engine mount wise, I had a little advancement. One of my mates suggested a Land Rover ones. Sure enough, I had a brand new one sitting on the shelf, as you do. Don't actually own anything that would use this mount, but I've got one. So yeah, they are a bit wider than the Pinto mounts, but they are smaller, and they are tougher. So that will fit perfect for the engine mount, especially on the starter side here, which is tighter. So that will go, yeah, see up in there, and even at the bottom of travel, it still doesn't hit the starter, and at the top we've got plenty of room. So I'm going to suss that out now, how I'm going to make a mount from there across. The only issue is with having the engine mount there, it's going to be physically impossible to remove a starter with an engine mount in place. But that's not the end of the world, because I can always whack a balance beam, an engine beam on the engine, hold up this side, take the engine mount off and do a starter. That's not a biggie, is it really? And then it'll be easy to remove a starter. So I'm going to have to work out how I'm going to fabricate some brackets from there to there on both sides. What have we still got going on issue wise here then? I need to make up some spacers here. Looking at that, it's probably best off I use some 25mm box. So I'll see what I've got on the shelf for that. Both sides. The ARB, we also want to make up a spacer, because if I've dropped the subframe, well, yeah, we want to probably space the ARB down a smidge more as well, and I might need to because of sump here. So I need to work out how we're going to do that. Again, possibly some 25mm box, and then do this same sort of indentation to it. That might work best for that. Need to do new brake lines all around the engine bay. Our next biggest issue is going to be the steering shaft. But I don't think, providing we move this fit in here onto this side of the manifold, would have plenty of space to come down here then with a downpipe, and the steering shaft should fit fine through that. So I'm not majorly concerned about that. We just have to take this apart here and weld onto it. And I'm assuming this side, yeah, this side here as well, because we can't exhaust into a chassis rail. So both sides of the manifold need altering. It would be nice to get a different manifold for it, but I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to be close to what we need, or probably anywhere near in a decent price bracket, because I'm being cheap. Engine mount back here, 8-engine gearbox mount. The factory one is way off of fitting. Well, actually no, it's very close on fitting if I built like spacer blocks. So that should go there. You know, if we built spacer blocks, it'd almost bolt straight up to the factory holes. But I don't want it sitting that low. So what I did with the RX-8 box is I had these mounts here, and this here goes across, uses poly bush mounts either side. So I'm going to do the same here, shorten this up, move these mounts onto here, and that will going to create this solid bar across here with poly bush mounts either end, and then I can put tabs straight from here to the mount frame. So that would make an easy job of that at least. I reckon we do that. That'd be easy. And it'll be a good, nice, stiff mount. There's going to be no rubber I can tear apart on that because it's just going to be over two cylindrical bushes each side. I thought I'd chuck the prop on for fun. Or say on, it's in the area. So that will sit up there. And then the prop bearing, again, almost go into the same Capri holes. Almost. But this one here, he's knackered. He's all split. So we need a new one of them. There's a part number there. I'll grab that in a second. So we need a new one of them. And then the rear prop is almost perfect. It looks like all we have to do is cut off somewhere down the end here and get the Atlas flange welded on, which I'm sure I've got a spare one of them. I do, on this big prop, which actually looks to be a very similar diameter to that prop. So that might work out not too bad as well. Ideally, again, I'll get that professionally done because that needs to be welded on perfectly parallel and balanced. Although they're the same diameter, I could be tempted to try and sleeve it and do it myself, but we'll see. That's not a job for yet. That's future jobs. So the prop's looking not the end of the world. The gearbox is fitting. There's one more bit of a tunnel I want to massage, but I'm pretty happy with that. The engine mounts looking absolutely fine. The ARB is going to bolt back up. This is fitting, which is very good news. Very good news. So I'm quite happy at the minute. I still won't know yet if the engine cover at the top's going to fit until I've got mounts made. And of course we're going to have to probably modify the heater bubble to better fit the engine cover. But I'm not worried about it yet. The main thing is to get it sat in there where it needs to sit and working. To which I'm pretty happy where it's sitting. We have actually got scope to bring it forward a smidge more. Of course, if we do that, that's going to put our weight further forward, which isn't ideal, but again, it was only 10mm, and it's also going to cause it to foul the starter motor more. Maybe we'll have to leave where it is. Yeah. Either way, I'm happy with that progress so far. So, we might as well finish it there. Thank you for watching. There's obviously a few other videos prior to this, on this build. And there's plenty of previous videos when I put the Cosworth in this over the years and done bits and bobs to it. And there's also loads of content on all sorts of things. So, yeah, if you happen to have enjoyed this bit of a random video, despite the lack of success currently, then why not subscribe? Yeah, drop a comment. Tell me if I'm being an idiot. Tell me if you think I'm a genius for putting this engine in this car, or am I just plain stupid? Most people think I'm plain stupid, and I agree, but I like stupid, so I roll with it. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I've been Jordan, and with any luck, I'll see you again next time. Cheers!